Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here at Your Own University. We have a next masterclass with Nancy over here, and she is going to be talking about emotional intelligence once again. One thing that I absolutely love about emotional intelligence is that we all have emotions, and yet nobody teaches us about emotional intelligence. One major issue that I'm having writing my dissertation, or one reason why I'm writing my dissertation right now, is because the DSM-4 and 5 are all about mental disorders, but half of them are either spiritual disorders or emotional disorders. They're energetic or emotional disorders, and not even mental. And yet we don't separate that enough in the world. We're taught how to physically take care of ourselves and mentally take care of ourselves, and everything's mindset. And this topic, your expertise is it's freeing. It's so freeing. So I'm super excited for you to be here. I think this is so important for everybody to go through. I wish that everybody got to go through a class like eating and nutrition or physical health in school. I think this should be mandatory learning and discovering for ourselves. So yay that we're offering it. Thank you.
You are so welcome. I'm so excited to teach this. This is one of my favorite topics for the very reasons that you shared. So I'm Nancy Coble. I'm a professional certified coach, core energy coach, Reiki master. So you can tell I kind of like energy. I like everything involved with energy, which includes our emotions. Because when we look at emotions, what that is, it's energy in motion.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how Lisha shared is that we're not taught about this. Most people can name about 5 emotions. Yeah. I have a book over here that has 150 emotions listed in it.
Yeah, I have these charts that I teach in my classes, and there's about 20 to 30 things that we have to define for our own emotional intelligence. And there's 4 phases. So it's like over 100 emotions that we all kind of assume is normal. So I'm going to hop off now and let you have your stage. Okay. Everybody, if you have any questions, if anything happens and goes wrong, if we freeze, we will come right back. You know, we are on technology, so just stick around, stick in the room, and trust that Zoom does bring you back. And other than that, if you have any questions, comment in the chat, and we'll open it up at the end.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, use the chat box, put your comments in there, any ahas you're getting, anything that you have, communicate in there. That would be great. All right, so the topic of our masterclass today is own your emotions, all of them. And what we're going to get into is we're going to get into unpacking your emotions in a healthy way, using your emotions to better your life. And we're going to add some tools to your emotional intelligence toolbox. So as I mentioned, let's first take a look at emotions. We have our mental body, we have our physical body, and we have our emotional body, and they all actually work together. They're integrated. They inform each other, and many of us don't have the emotional intelligence that helps. But when we look at emotion, we're energy in motion. The question is, what kind of emotion? Are we suppressing our emotions? Are we offloading our emotions on other people, impacting our relationships? Or are we allowing emotions to flow through us? When we suppress our emotions, we're causing damage to ourselves. Okay, so when emotions get stuck in our body, we can cause physical harm to our physical body, our emotional body, and our mental body, and we get stuck. So before we dive too far into it, I'd love to get some awareness, because it's all integrated around the narratives you have around emotions, particular emotions, because we all tell stories. We have a narrative around emotions, judgments around emotions. And so I'm going to list a number of emotions, and I want you to tune into what you're feeling physically when I share these emotions, what you're thinking, if you're judging that emotion as good or bad. And as I mentioned, I've got a field guide of 150 emotions. So I just picked out a handful of those. So before I list them, I want you to just take a moment and just take a deep breath in through your nose and just get grounded in your body and just be present with what I'm sharing with you. And as I mentioned, so as I share an emotion, I want you to just tune in. What am I thinking about that emotion? Do I have any judgments about that emotion? Do I avoid it? And so this is part of the process. So the first emotion is angry. Next
You
emotion.
want us to type in what we feel? Sorry, Nancy, I just
Yeah, go ahead. I was just thinking that would be fun to type into the chat box what comes up for you with each emotion that I share. And I think that
okay,
would be
so we're going to tap into the chat box when we, so you say angry, and then we're going to tap in how we experience it or what comes up for us, anything.
Yeah, anything.
Okay, cool. Just making sure I understood how to participate.
Yep. So the first emotion is angry. And so for me, growing up, angry wasn't an emotion I was allowed to experience. Oh, I love that. I use anger for my benefit to energize me. In others, I get kind of fearful of it. That makes a lot of sense, Pamela. Yeah, angry is a powerful catalyst when we can use it in the right way. Next emotion is happy. So what comes up for you when I say happy? So playful. Yeah. How about love? Lonely? Rage? Courage? Lust? Peace? Joy? Yeah, I love the emotion of peace. That's one of my favorite. However, so I've shared with you a number of different emotions. Some can be viewed as good ones. Some could be viewed as not good ones, bad ones. But it's all the narrative that we're telling ourselves. There are no right or wrong emotions or good or bad. There are more powerful emotions. There are emotions that are forced. There are emotions that really truly have power. But when we think of it, it's really just part of our operating system. Our emotions are sending us messages all the time. And so it's, what is the message it's telling me? What's the message it has for me right now? And sometimes those messages are valuable, and sometimes it's the story we're making up based on everything that we've come from. But there's valuable information in the emotions that we're feeling in our body, with the physical feeling and the emotions are linked with the story we're telling ourselves. So I love this quote by Brene Brown. Emotional literacy is the foundation of resilience, empathy, compassion, and self-awareness. So there is a benefit for us to really get in tune with the emotions we're feeling, what's going on in our body, and what that message is that it's trying to tell us. Another key thing about emotions is that they're contagious. So what emotion are we bringing into a situation, a relationship, a conversation, a room? What is that emotion? I had, and if we're meeting with somebody, what emotion are we bringing to that? Because emotions are contagious. There's a concept called emotional contagion. It's neuroscience. And anytime you think about going into a room, whether it's high energy or low energy or peace or conflict, you can feel it and you're subjected to it. So there's a lot going in the world. What are you listening to? What's impacting your emotions? All right. So how was that? Did anything come up for you when I went through that list of emotions? Were you judging them? Did they trigger anything? Any responses in you? Feel free to type in the chat box if anything came up. Ooh, nice, a heart opening. That is one of my, okay. More of a flow, wonderful. So yeah, our hearts are so powerful because that's really where our emotional center is. We spend a lot of time up in our head, intellectualizing things, but it's really the heart that's powerful. Yeah, emotions are fair game and part of total consciousness and intelligence. I love that, Pamela. Beautiful. So yeah, this is where our power really is when we can take our emotions, team it with our logic and our rational mind, our brain, and our physical body, and get all three working together in a powerful way. We can create powerful change in the world simply by integrating all three, because we're in congruence within all our bodies, basically, to take it forward, aligned with our purpose. So how do we do this? How do we unpack our emotions in a healthy way? Because we 100% of the time have an emotion going on. We might not be aware of it because we were never taught it, but 100% of the time, it's just part of our operating system. There is an emotion going on. And so when we can start to grow our emotional literacy, we can unpack our emotions in a healthy way. Okay, so this is not suppressing it. This is not offloading it, but it's really getting in tune to what am I feeling in my body? What's the message that's being sent? What's the purpose for it? So to start doing that, we need to get awareness around the emotions. We need to get in tune to our own emotions. We need to get in tune to what's going on in our physical body when we're feeling an emotion, what's going on in our mental, our thoughts, the stories we're creating when we have an emotion. And to do that, when we're starting to feel something in our body, different emotions may have different physical responses. And when we can start to marry those, we can start to create real change. So I'm going to share an example. So a couple of weeks ago, I found myself in a dentist chair. I had pain in my mouth. And so I was a little nervous because I was going to the dentist. But what happened in that dentist chair put me into a fight or flight response. I was in fear in that chair. It went from having an infection to them wanting to pull my tooth, doing a bone graft, and preparing for an implant. And my body went into literal fight or flight. They were giving me Novocaine. There was pain in my tooth when they tried to pull it out. And then so they gave me more Novocaine, and my body was sending me powerful messages. You are in fight or flight. I was getting ready to pass out. I needed a cold compress on my head. I needed them to put the chair back. And at that point, I realized I could not have whatever they were doing in that moment, and I needed to leave. So my body was having a response, and I knew I was not going to be able to bring those emotions down to be able to be in that dentist chair to have that procedure done. So I left. I said no, and I left, and I sat with it, and I figured out what the next step forward is. So there was no peace or calm in that, and I am not one to really get a medical procedure done if I'm not in that peace and calm state. Our emotions have an impact on our ability to heal and our physical health. So having that awareness that I was there helped me pull out, step away. So you can always step away when you're feeling one of those emotions that's uncomfortable. So taking that pause is really powerful to get into tune into what's going on. So that's first, is learning to identify the emotions, building your vocabulary around them, and really getting in tune to what you're physically feeling when different emotions come up. Love is going to feel different than peace. Peace is going to feel different than rage. You might be angry. Angry is one of the most powerful emotions because it's giving you a message that there's something off, that there might be a boundary being crossed, that there's a sense of injustice. And it's really tuning into what anger is telling me. It could be someone else is crossing a boundary, could be a values conflict, it could be a story you're telling yourself based on a past experience or based on the future as opposed to being present. But it's for you to discern, what do I need to do with this anger? What action can I take? And it might not be in that moment, but it might be figuring out where that sense of injustice might be, where that anger is coming from. As I said, it's key to pause, to step away if necessary. It's okay to take a break. Me taking a break from that dentist office was needed and necessary. There were a whole bunch of things that were happening, a bunch of narrative I was telling myself, and it ended up being incredibly powerful. I didn't go back to that dentist office. I went to a different place where I actually had the procedure on Thursday. So I'll share this because what I brought into that procedure was peace and calm. I brought the Reiki energy in. I asked for an explanation of what they were going to do. I was okay with sitting in the chair for a long time because just having the tooth pulled or being able to consult with the oral surgeon was really important to me. And knowing I needed that before I could have it done was honoring myself, but really tuning into what I needed and what my body was telling me I needed. So pause, step away from if necessary, especially if it's some of the lower levels of energy, like anger and fear and shame. Shame is by far the most detrimental emotion that we have because it's personifying those emotions like I am, I am bad, I am wrong, and as opposed to I am feeling. So that's a powerful thing you can shift away from shame. Instead of saying I am angry, it's like I am feeling angry right now, or he is feeling angry, or he's expressing anger. So pause, step away. I do want to share that we all have an inner critic. We all have this judge within us. And sometimes we do get emotionally hijacked. We justify and rationalize our behavior. So be aware of that. And when you are being emotionally hijacked, one of the things you can do is breathe, simply breathe to shift your energy away from that. Because when you are being emotionally hijacked, you are disconnecting from your logical, rational brain, and you're not going to be able to come up with the solutions or the creativity or the innovation you need. And so that's what's powerful about using the emotions to better your life, is that when you're able to do that, you can step into greater creativity and innovation and intuition, tap into your intuition. So truly, any emotion is sending us a message. And so it's our job to really discern and get curious about what that message is. Is it a message for us? Is it a message keeping us small? Is it a message that's catalyzing positive change in the world, whether it's our world or the bigger world? So what is that message? So I love when courage is a very powerful emotion. That's actually the one that shifts behind the lower levels, like anger and fear especially. When you're feeling fear, courage is going to launch you into the higher energies of love and joy and peace and positive change. But courage is hard because that's leaning into your edges. That's going into the cave that you don't want to go into because it's scary in there. And so it's recognizing those emotions, leaning into it and taking those steps. So I'm going to stop here for a moment. Does anybody have any questions or any comments on what was just shared or anything that was confusing? Feel free to type in the chat box.
I'm just wondering if we want to open it up for comments, because I don't see everybody typing in the.
Yeah, I
I don't know
don't.
if everyone's figuring out how to do it. So I'm going to invite you guys to unmute if you want, because this is so valuable. Okay.
All right. So does anybody have any thoughts or comments so far? All right. So one is hopefully even just what I presented will give you some insight in how you can use emotions to even better your life. Because once we become aware and more emotionally intelligent and in tune, we're no longer hiding behind our emotions. We're no longer, I mean, okay, so we are not perfect. So yes, there are going to be times, and it might even happen just in certain areas of our life. We might be suppressing an emotion. And so that's when we want to get curious. If we're thinking that it's not okay to have that emotion, or we're saying yes to something we want to say no to start to get curious about some of those things when we're acting out of alignment with who we are. When we're out of alignment with who we are, we're going to do things that may not be truly powerful. And that's where we're suppressing our emotions. Because when we are in alignment, this can be hard. I mean, if we're feeling these emotions and we are in relationship with someone else, we might need to have conversations that are not easy to have. But this is where we can really truly have a better life, because if we are able to lean in and have the courage to own all our emotions, to rumble with our emotions, to have those conversations in a healthy way, which means that we're allowing the other person to also have their emotions. And being able to engage in these conversations in a healthy way will actually bring us closer in relationship, to create positive change across the board. I mean, I don't have to say it. I mean, right now, if we look out in the world and we read the news, it's very divisive. There are people with very differing views, and it's very challenging. But if we can get curious about our own emotions and get curious about their emotions or what they're feeling, we might be able to change things for the positive. We all have our own stories going on. We all have our own perspectives. And the path forward is a bigger bowl of perspectives, basically. But we have to do our own work. So as I mentioned, when we can deal with our own emotions, own them, all of them, the sad ones. So I'm going to go in a few minutes of adding more tools to your EQ toolbox. But it's really powerful when we can own them. Growing up, I grew up like this. I grew up in an Irish family, and we did not talk about emotions. had to suppress my emotions, especially anger and sadness. I was too sensitive. We didn't talk about um, anything of that had to do with emotions. And I am so blessed right now. I've got a 19-year-old daughter, and I am grateful that she is comfortable coming to talk to me about anything. Uh, she uh, she gave me a lot of education and emotional intelligence, because anytime you have small children, their emotions are out for display. They don't have, they didn't learn everything yet about what we can or cannot do. So when they're feeling sad or hungry or angry or happy or joyful, you're seeing it on a toddler's face. There's no filter into I can or cannot feel this emotion. It's just a beautiful, it's challenging because sometimes the anger, especially if we're judging anger, it's what does that child need as opposed to why are they angry? So a really, really powerful way to look at emotion, because small children just feel what they feel and they emote what they emote. And so maybe we need to go back to that, to be more, and not necessarily like that, because they don't necessarily have the emotional control, which is what we want as adults, is to be able to feel our emotions, but also have emotional control such that we're not causing damage to the relationship, to the situation, to the organization. So, so how do we do this? What tools can we use to build our emotional intelligence? One is a journal. Keep a journal of your emotions for a week, a couple of weeks, and tune into what emotion it is, what your physical body is feeling, what thoughts are going on in your head. Another key one, because triggers give us a lot of messages. And anytime I'm triggered, that's usually what's going on. That's an excellent opportunity to explore your emotions, explore what story you're telling yourself about what just happened, and then what you need to do about it. What's going on in your physical body, what's going on in your mind, what's going on all around with triggers. So keeping a journal on triggers. When you're feeling that emotion that you're being hijacked and it's not a great opportunity to express it, you may want to pull back, take a break, remove yourself from the situation. It's okay to do that. Come back later and just say, I can't talk about this right now, because if your brain's in fight or flight, if you're being hijacked and you cannot bring it back into having a rational, civil conversation, you want to be able to remove yourself from that situation if it makes sense. And that's where you can do breathing. So if you are in, let's say you cannot do it, simply breathing deeply will bring your brain back into that logical, rational place out of fight or flight. The deep breaths, so square box breathing, where you breathe in for 4, hold it, let out for 4. Nobody has to even see you doing it. Pam and I are taking a class called Positive Intelligence right now, and we're learning other methods for also shifting out of our judge brain, our inner critic, the one that's telling us that we're not good enough and fueling all kinds of emotions that are not really helpful in many situations, because most of the time we're making stories up as opposed to, but we're also learning how to discern what's something we need to deal with versus something that is a story that we're making up. So yeah, braining going into terror. So how do we get ourselves out of that terror is we need to breathe is a great one. Focusing on something beautiful. If we're finding beauty in a scenario, if we can take a break, getting curious, what's the gift in this situation? So with me in the dentist chair a couple of weeks ago, I had to shift to what's the gift? What am I learning from this experience? And looking back now, I can see what I'm learning from that experience. In the moment, I was in terror. I was in fight or flight. I was having a trauma response that I knew I was not going to be able to get out of in that chair, because I just felt like I wasn't a person. I felt like I was this cool, it's like, wow, an opportunity to do this cool dental procedure. And it was a young dentist. So I think she was probably more excited to do this cool dental procedure than really thinking about me as a human being, as a person who has divine sovereignty over my own body and the ability to make choices about my body. Um, and so that was part of my learning over the past couple of weeks, that I really am in charge of my body. I got a couple more opinions that two differed from the first dentist's opinion, and I didn't have to have all of the things she wanted to do, to do to my mouth, which seemed very exciting probably to her as a young dentist. So I'm grateful that my body sent me those messages to get out of that chair and leave, because otherwise I'd probably be dealing with thousands of dollars of medical bills and a procedure that probably would not have worked after I consulted with a couple other experts. So I'm actually grateful for that. It was terrifying in that moment and very traumatic in that moment. So shift your attention, finding beauty, taking a break, going for a walk in nature, going for a hike, getting out into the woods, into nature if you don't have woods, because I know not everybody lives in an area where there's woods. Just getting out in nature is really powerful. Getting out into the sun is getting very powerful. A meditation, loving kindness meditation, self-compassion, self-kindness is huge. One key thing is, and I know, is not listening to news, especially in the morning when you wake up, not getting online first thing when you wake up, but having some time to yourself. Change your language from I'm frustrated to I'm feeling frustrated. Another one is dance and exercise, just to dance out, especially when you're feeling a lot of high emotions. Grounding yourself. I used to have a lot of, like, if I have a lot of love flowing through my body in a huge way through my heart chakra, I can feel like I have so much energy in my body that it's difficult for me to think. So I found laying down on the ground was really helpful, like just grounding my energy, laying down and letting some of it go into the earth was really powerful for me in getting some of it out so I could actually take positive action forward. When I have that much energy flowing through my body and that emotion of love, I can't necessarily catalyze it into action until I release some of it out, if that makes sense. So, all right, so there are some tips about emotions and helping you with emotions, and I can share some more stories. Does anybody have any questions, any comments, anything they'd like more clarification on?
I'm going to ask to unmute again. I mean, there's so many different emotions. Recognizing our emotions is really important. How, when that story is going on, because it's so uncomfortable sometimes to just feel things that are so uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You gave a whole bunch of tools, but when you're in that reactive mode already.
Yeah.
So what happens when you're already there? I love that you kind of told about it with your story about the dentist. You got up and left, but if you don't have a flight response or a freeze response, getting up and leaving is super hard for us fight responses. So
yeah.
I mean, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, it's just the fight, flight, or freeze, the nervous system response to a trigger. So we have one action. We all have a domineering one. What is yours? Is it flight? And then how did you train yourself to do that if it's not?
Oh, mine is definitely flight. So I'm
You
like
can't get up and leave easier. That's amazing.
No.
Yours is
Yeah.
flight or fight?
It's definitely flight. It depends on the scenario and it depends on what's going on. Depends on what's triggered, because sometimes it is fight. I've got another excellent example of with my brother. I did not get up and leave, and we were in Ireland. And usually it's not the thing that's triggered, It's fascinating. So we went on a pub tour in Ireland for a week, and we were in a bar up the pub one night listening to Irish music. He had a beer, I had a cider. My other two sisters were with us. So I'm one of four. My brother is the oldest, and he has three little sisters that were in his care, as we were kids. And a lot of the stuff we get as children. So he was protecting his little chicks, his little sisters. Well, we're not so little anymore. So this is a couple years ago. And we're in this bar, and I live in Maryland. My siblings all lived in New Jersey at the time. So I took a train up to the airport in New Jersey and met them there. They all drove to the airport. So during the conversation at the pub, he's like, oh yeah, well, I'll chip in for airport parking. You'll pay X. And I just sat there. I'm like, well, I'm not paying for parking because I didn't park at the airport. I took a train up. So that was completely logical and rational to me to refuse to pay parking. But I'm his little sister, and he had control as when we were little kids. So the fact that I said no to him triggered something in him. And he got incredibly angry at me in the bar. And he's 6 feet, I'm 4'11", just to give you an idea. And he's not a slim 6 feet. He's a normal size 6 foot man. So he's towering over me, yelling at me. And my emotional response, if as a kid, I would have gotten up and left. But in my power in that moment, I stayed in that chair. I wasn't leaving. The music was good. I had my cider in front of me. The tears started coming down my face because of the emotional. I realized that was fight or flight. And if it wasn't my brother, who I knew would never lay a hand on me, I would have been afraid of being physically harmed. Now, I knew he was not going to physically harm me, but he was emotionally harming me in that moment. My sister next to me is telling me not to cry. And my response was, oh, I'm crying. I'm so crying right now. And I'm not leaving either. I'm staying here. I am not getting up. I'm leaving here. And I just stood in my power, but I allowed my emotions, my physical response to be okay with it. So in the past, I would have run out of there. I would have succumbed. I probably would have paid him. I didn't pay him, but I probably would have just silenced, let into it, and just quiet it, as opposed to staying in that serious place of uncomfort. But I was standing in my principles. I was staying true to me and honoring that. And I didn't care if anybody else felt uncomfortable with the tears. And the funny thing is, my other sister was completely oblivious that this even happened, and she was sitting at the table also. So I don't know if that helped any, but I think it's really building up that muscle of recognizing that there's nothing wrong with our emotions. They're sending us powerful messages. And sometimes we may need further help. So sometimes uncovering some of these, especially if there's trauma, we may need additional help to unravel some of that stuff. And it's okay to go get that additional help. In fact, it's really important to get that external help to go through some of these. Was that helpful, Lisha?
Yeah, for sure. And I think Pamela had a comment here. Yeah. Yeah, perfect. She just said that she was incredibly powerful, Nancy. I'm rethinking many of my stories in my life and when I ignored my emotions.
Yeah. I would think I was the queen of ignoring my emotions, suppressing them, not thinking they were okay, judging them. I think that's part of why I like this stuff, because I've recognized how powerful they are when we actually listen to them and we start to discern them and we get curious about them, that we can actually alchemize them into this intuition, open up our intuition, open our creativity, that we can really have a positive impact on the world, take back our power, basically, because that's part of it, is that when we do suppress our emotions, or we do avoid them, or we think they're not okay, we are actually giving our power away, whether it's to a situation, whether it's to someone else. Like in the case of my brother, I refused to give my power away, not out of defiance, but truly because it was in alignment with who I am. So I wasn't I wasn't out of stubbornness. It was just me standing in, this is what I believe, and I'm not going to allow you to control, have that control over me in a way. Of course, I'm sure some of that is story, because I don't know fully what was going on with him and why I triggered him in such a way. But I also know that happens, is that sometimes we are here to trigger other people, to cause an emotional response in them for their healing. And sometimes that's really hard. That's really challenging when somebody else is reacting. And we are in that process because it's a relationship. I can think of another experience also, and this is more work related. Oh yeah, Pamela, that's powerful. I had a story that to be successful, I had to move past my emotions. Oh yeah, so gosh, yeah, working in a corporate environment, especially as women, as I mentioned with my brother, the emotional response, my physical response was tears. That response was not really allowed in the work environment. And many women struggle with that because that's a normal physiological response for women to have when we're feeling all of this. Tears come out of our eyes. So I wasn't crying in the pub, but tears were flowing out of my eyes. And I know in the corporate environment, if I felt those emotions, it was causing pain so that the tears wouldn't come out until I was able to get into a private location and allow myself to emote. But that was the key thing. I still allowed myself to emote. I just couldn't do it in that meeting necessarily, but I did allow myself to allow the emotions to flow out. So you can't necessarily maybe not be able to do it in that moment, but to be able to do it is really important. I mean, there were times in corporate where I would take a step outside. I knew I had to go outside. I had to separate myself from the building and go out. Essential oils. I had created a blend with the last company I was working with called Zen. And Zen, I would smell the Zen, like after coming out of a very intense meeting, I would, where my emotions of irritation were probably heightened because I would get irritated in certain circumstances, especially working in areas of gender equity. When you're working with men who want to do the right thing, but they're not in the shoes of the women, and so they don't fully understand. So I would get frustrated and irritated. So honoring those, but then figuring out ways where I could process those emotions in a positive way. Essential oils were very helpful, but I would be seen in my office smelling the essential oils to actually calm my nervous system down. Because I would be frustrated and irritated and figuring out how do I deal with this moving forward. Oh yeah, so working, I was told I was one of the guys. Yeah, I was very much working as an engineer with all men. That's pretty much adjusting and adapting and being in that environment was really, yeah, that was part of it. So understandable. Yeah, and you have a legal background, so it's similar too in that very much masculine environment without the feminine. And that's what's powerful about the emotions. The emotions really tap into our feminine power, which we all have both feminine and masculine power. And integrated is even more powerful. And that's what is so important about this. This is really tapping into our feminine power, and we all have it, both men and women have emotions all day, every day. So it's really that part of the feminine, when we can integrate it with the masculine, is really incredibly powerful. And that is that intellect, the logic, the rational brain with the emotional body to come with a path forward. Yeah, which is probably why I love this topic of emotions. So any other thoughts, any other questions, feel free to unmute or put something in the chat box.
That was just so informative. I think we all can take a lot from it. I know I can. again. I'd like to watch again and again. I think I'm going to watch this a few times. So let's just wait just a few minutes, make sure that there's not a lag time, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I can share one more story if we want for emotions in the workplace, if we want, and then we can wrap it up. Unless there's more, anybody has a question. Recording. So Pamela's ready to listen to. Yeah, so now to be the
So it
opposite.
will be in Nancy's classroom at Your Own University. So if you do want it, and the rest of our classes, that's where you get it. We do invite everybody to come live to our live class, but then our members get the replays. So you have that option, but it is an action.
Yeah. So I'll share, if that's okay, I'll share one more story with you, because I think this one's also that getting in tune with your emotions and recognizing there's no good or bad emotions, but they're sending you that message. And this was in the work environment also. I was dealing with a manager who was treating one of his employees differently than everyone else. And I have a background in leadership and organizational development and management development. So I have expertise in this area. He had reached out via email on how to handle a situation with this employee. So I responded back in an email with some advisement on how to deal with this scenario. He responded back with that he wasn't going to do that and gave me about 2 paragraphs of why he was not going to do that. That was a trigger for me. My emotions went sky high on that one. I took some deep breaths because first of all, it was, why did you ask? Well, that was the sarcastic response of me was, well, why did you even ask? So I was getting ready to type that back and shoot it back. I took some deep breaths. I had a meeting with him that day, one-on-one, and I recognized with where I was emotionally hijacked at that moment that I was not going to be able to be in that meeting with just him and me. I didn't sense that he would listen to anything I would say and hear me. And so I reached out. First I left the meeting and I found the program manager I was working with, and I went into his office, and I had another meeting I was going to, and I just said, hey, I was like, I'm really torqued right now, because I still had this anger and I still had all this frustration in me and irritation in me. I was like, I can't talk right now. But do you have a few minutes? I have a meeting, and can I come back? And he said, yes. And I said, it has nothing to do with you. You didn't do anything, because I didn't want him to get emotionally hijacked and have stories going on, because it had nothing to do with him. But went back to him and I asked if he could, I told him what happened, and I asked if he could join me in the meeting. And he could, and it ended up being a very powerful meeting, because me and him were on the same page with what was going on with this supervisor. And he was able to bring that calming, balanced energy with mine. It was really almost that integration of the masculine and feminine energy in this meeting with a manager that was very challenging from dealing with employees fairly. And I'm talking about diversity, equity, inclusion issues, which are very challenging and where a lot of these emotions come up. Yeah, so this stuff is real, but learning how to manage them and how we can take those forward and what messages they're telling us is really key. So that message was telling me, yeah, you need support not to go into that meeting by yourself. It's not going to go well. You need that grounding masculine energy in them there for you to be able to be heard, basically. And unfortunately, that is a scenario that does happen still in organizations as we're moving forward to get more equity between the masculine and the feminine, and honoring both. So it's a journey. and we're still going there. So I did want to share that, but that's part of getting in tune to what's this emotion telling me and what do I need to do about it, and not judging it, but knowing it's sending a valuable message. So, all right. Yes. Thanks, Pamela. I'm so grateful for each of you showing up. If Sherry, Sylvia, Pamela, Lisha, if you have any more comments or questions, love to hear them. And so grateful for you all being here today.
And us, you. All right. So I'll invite everybody to unmute again. I hope I'm doing that right. I'm just like, and ask to unmute. I'll come back on to close it out.
Sherry's unmuted.
Sherry's unmuted.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate this. I'll be thinking lots about this more.
Oh, great. Thanks, Sherry. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice. Pamela said, you're amazing. Yes, yes.
So are you. Thank you.
All right. So everybody, this is going to be in Nancy's classroom. So she is in our emotional intelligence department. So if you do have a membership, simply log in. If you ever have any questions, go ahead and just email us back at info@yourownuniversity.org. And when you get to the classrooms, choose emotional intelligence. You'll see Nancy's pretty picture there, and enter a classroom. You can take this class and our other classes, and then of course you can go around and check out all of our teachers and wonderful stuff. Thank you so much for being here. Nancy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lisha.
You're
And
so welcome.
And Sylvia and Sherry. I appreciate you all being here.
Yeah, very much. It's so much information. We will digest it for sure.
Yeah, it is a lot. Emotional intelligence emotions are a lot, especially because we haven't really learned. Most of us have not learned them, and were not taught them growing up, basically.
And we're taught that they're wrong or bad, or which ones are wrong or bad, instead of uncomfortable, right?
Exactly. That you're not supposed to be angry or sad or have fear or be irritated, or they're not okay, right?
Yeah. And then what we resist persists. So then we're like, always mad and angry. And we have all these issues.
Keep coming back.
Thank you for being a light in this tunnel of darkness to the world, and sharing it here. I love you. All right, you guys, we are going to wrap it up. Is there anything else? I think everyone said thank you, and I think that's it. Do you have anything last closing words, Nancy?
Oh, I do want to share, there is an app called Mood Meter.
Okay.
By I think it's Dr. Mark Beckman or Breckman, but it's Mood Meter. You can get it on the App Store, but it'll give you insight into different emotions. So you put in, I'm feeling, whether you're high energy or low energy or pleasant or unpleasant, and then you can tune in and you can start building your emotional literacy just using the Mood Meter.
Mood Meter, and it's an app.
Yeah, it's an app, and it's very short. Yeah, it's
awesome.
Just one of the feelings. So you can start building your emotional literacy.
Cool. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, you guys, thank you so much. That is a wrap. We'll talk to you next time.
Sounds good.
Join us at Your Own University. Like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. You're not going to want to miss a bit of this.